Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Writers' Workshop. Our topic tonight is story elements, description, and dialogue. And our instructor is a local author who specializes in historical fiction. Please help me welcome back Jeanette Watts.
All right, so I was under the impression that today we're talking about descriptions and dialogue. Is everybody else on the same page as me? Excellent. Okay. Just thought I'd double check because you just never know. I'm like, as I was just telling you, this morning I was in a colonial outfit talking about bowing and curtsying and stuff like that. So I'm going to be going back and forth here just to make sure I stay on my outline here. So we're going to do this the interactive way. Anybody wanted to venture out loud? What are descriptions to dialogue for? I mean, you know, as writing goes, they're all tools in our toolbox, but what are we doing with descriptions and dialogue?
We explain the place and the people.
It's plain old who, what, I'm going to have a problem here. When, where, how, and why. There we go. We're just going to have these long, skinny little columns. You'll notice, it's those Post-it note things. I had to do the Post-it note things. I could have just used the marker board, but we get the Post-it note thing. So, you know, when everything you're doing is, you know, one of these categories, it's kind of like, you know, when you're doing an invitation. If you're writing, here's a party. Who, what, when, where, how, why. It's my birthday. You know, so there's, you know, who, me. What, birthday. Why, or actually it's what, party, why, birthday, right? So if we take this down a little bit farther, so who? You're establishing character. This is going to be really fun as we get narrower here. You know, and not just character, who the characters are. And, you know, each individual character. If we're talking about, another thing that we're using with descriptions and dialogue is grounding the scene in a particular place and time. So where's when and where? We'll just put scene here. What do I have for my next one? If you want to establish tone, genre, voice of the writer or the characters, there's your why. We'll say tone. And what have we got? Show, don't tell. How many times have you guys heard that one? Is anybody really kind of sick of show, don't tell? On the other hand, when somebody's doing the thing and they tell, don't show, is that what goes through your head like on repeat the whole time? It's like, show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. And you can't even hear the bad dialogue because all you can hear is show, don't tell running along in your head. And that would be how and what? Show, don't tell. How, show, don't tell. So we're going to see how much we can, some of the other stuff I'll show, we'll fit into our rubric here. I got to put this down because we have other colors we get to play with. So now you're telling your story and you really have a choice with every scene you're writing, descriptions or dialogue. I have I've got, oh yes, one of the things about being a writer, remember to do the shameless plug. I'm a writer. I got books. I take Venmo. So, Jane Austen, historical fiction. It's an Olivia. Everybody say hi, Olivia. Sorry. So, okay, so descriptions or dialogue. Most of the time you'll have a mix of some and other. I very often will say, have a dialogue that towards the end of it, once we've covered the things we need to, you sort of conclude with a little bit of description to sort of like summarize things. But I am going to spend a lot of time doing, I forgot I was going to do a little thing first. Okay, we're going to write a scene. It's going to be a very short scene. All right, so the scene is, she was nervous about the test. Okay, that's a declarative sentence, not exactly memorable writing. So what would you do? How important is this test to your story, and what do you do with it? So, nervous about the test. Here's the description. After she chewed off the nails on all 10 fingers, she started working on her cuticles. When she had 10 bloody red crescents at the base of her fingers, she started wearing gloves so she would stop gnawing on her hands. I never said she's nervous, but again, show, don't tell. You get from the gnawing the hands that she's nervous, right? I haven't said what she's nervous about, but there you go. There's a description of it. Here's a dialogue. You can't be tired. I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Can't we just go over this one more time? We've gone over it 100 times. We went over it through dinner. We've gone over it after dinner. It's late, I'm tired, you're going to be fine. So we've just kind of established a couple of characters, and again, we haven't actually said that, we've obviously studied for something. So, but that's two different things. All we've said in either one of these is she's nervous about the test. So, but how you tell it. So, keep in mind what the information is you're trying to impart and which option works best for a given scene. How are you dividing it? Any way you feel like it. All right, so this class is going to be, oh my God, that sounds so formal. I'm going to be spending a lot more time reading from books than I ever do in any of these other topics that I've done for Solemn. But this is the time to learn from the best and the worst. So I am starting with one of my favorites. It's kind of inevitable. I always have to put a little Jane Austen in everything. I'm sorry for the Jane Austen people, but let's talk dialogue. And is everybody here familiar with Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice? Is everybody like seen it? And it's like, yeah, you can't get away from it these days, right? So we can't get away from today either, sorry. My dear Mr. Bennet, said his lady to him one day, have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last? Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. Notice it's not in quotes, it's still dialogue, but it's not actually in quotes. Interesting technique to put in when you're tired of quotations and it seems it's getting tiresome. I never even think about that when I'm writing a dialogue, so, but there it is. But it is, returned she, for Mrs. Long has just been here and she told me all about it. Mr. Bennet made no answer. Do you not want to know who has taken it? Cried his wife impatiently. You want to tell me and I have no objection to hearing it. This was invitation enough. Why, my dear, you must know Mrs. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four to see the place, and was so much delighted with it that he agreed with Mr. Morris immediately that he is to take possession before Michaelmas, and some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of next week. What's his name? Bingley. Is he married or single? Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls. How so? How can it affect them? My dear Mr. Bennet, replied his wife, how can you be so tiresome? You must know I am thinking of his marrying one of them. Is that his design in settling here? Design? Nonsense, how can you talk so? But it is very likely he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes. I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or you may send them by themselves, which perhaps will be better, since for you as handsome as any of them, Mr. Bingley might like you best of the party. My dear, you flatter me. I certainly have had my share of beauty, but I do not pretend to be anything extraordinary now. When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over thinking of her own beauty. In such a cases, a woman has not often much beauty to think of. But, my dear, you must indeed go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes into the neighborhood. It is more than I gauge for, I assure you. But consider your daughters. Only think what an establishment it would be for one of them. Sir William and Lady Lucas are determined to go merely on that account, for in general, you know, they visit no newcomers. Indeed, you must go, for it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not. You are over-scrupulous, surely. I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie. I desire you will do no such thing. Lizzie is not a bit better than the others, and I am sure she is not half so handsome as Jane, nor half so good-humored as Lydia. but you are always giving her the preference. They have none of them much to recommend them, replied he. They were all silly and ignorant like other girls, but Lizzie has something more of quickness than her sisters. Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your old children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves. You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least. Ah, you do not know what I suffer. But I hope you will get over it and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year come into the neighborhood. It will be no use to us if 20 should come, since you will not visit them. Depend on it, my dear. When there are 20, I will visit them all. Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. That was all of 2 pages, and that was so densely packed. It's sort of like, yeah, come on, will you please join me? Thank you. So, who, what, when, where, how, why? Who? We have just been in most of the main, how many of the main characters have we just met? First, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, but we've also been introduced to 3 of the sisters and Mr. Bingley. We've just been introduced to what, 6 of the characters? So we've got, Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet. And did you notice how much we just learned about them? I mean, even before we got that little description at the end, it was almost unnecessary. We've got their dynamic down. We've got down his wicked sense of humor. We've got down her straightforwardness, and the plot. I mean, we all know the story, right? They move in the neighborhood. What happens in the story? Mom is successful, marries off one of the girls to the rich guy that's moving in. We know that we've got Mr. Bingley, and we know that he's rich. We've got Jane, Lizzie, and we know that Lizzie is Mr. Bennet's favorite. We know that Mrs. Bennet thinks that Jane's the pretty one. We know Lizzie is Mr. Bennet's favorite, the smart one, we'll just say. And Lydia is the one you want to be at a party with. So we've really established a lot of who right there. But what? We know the plot, marriage. The scene, when and where. When, we know we're in England. We know we're in the country in England with the manors. And when, whoops, I just did it backwards there, so sorry. Where is England? And when, Michaelmas, and he'll be in the, so we know Michaelmas is September 29th. So we know it's September. How and why, that show don't tell. We were not told a lot of things except inside that dialogue. That was so densely packed. Anybody have any comments and additions to add to that? Since I know most of you have heard it at least a million times. All right, 1995, Pride and Prejudice, or 2005 Prejudice? Who likes Colin Firth version? Nope. Who likes the, what's his name? Yep. Okay, so that is, let's see. I'm gonna check my notes here. We've been introduced to the Bennets, married, interesting dynamic. Dad's wicked sense of humor. Mom doesn't have one. They have 5 daughters. All the women are smoking hot, including Mom. That gets overlooked a lot in the adaptations. Mom is smoking hot too. We've also been introduced to the narrator. I skipped that first iconic sentence about it is a truth to be universally acknowledged. I just skipped that, but that is sort of caustic. At the end, when the narrator comes back and summarizes Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, we've got this very caustic narrator. We've been introduced to that too. Let's see, we've got the Michaelmas, time and the place. So yeah. Now that we've had that reading of very densely packed, look at what dialogue can accomplish. That was a lot of exposition, but it wasn't just exposition. It also developed a whole lot of character. They introduced us to half the cast. I am now going to read from The Grand Sophie. I'd heard from Jane Austen fan fiction people and all that. I was like, oh, this one keeps coming up. Georgette Heyer, The Grand Sophie. It's like, okay, I'm a Janeite. I'll try this. Everybody seems to know the book. And then I started reading it. It's going to take a while. Bear with me. Cecilia's disposition was shy, and although her manners lacked the forbidding reserve which distinguished those of her elder brother, they were never confiding. Yet within a very few minutes, she found herself pouring into her cousin's ears some at least of the evils of her situation. Sophie listened to her with interest and sympathy, but the constant reoccurrence of Mr. Rivenhall's name seemed to puzzle her, and she presently interrupted to say, I beg your pardon, but this Charles, is he not your brother? My eldest brother, said Cecilia. Well, that is what I collected, but what is he to say to anything? Cecilia sighed. You will soon discover, Sophie, that nothing may be done in this house without Charles's sanction. It is he who orders everything, arranges everything, and rules everything. Now, let me understand this, said Sophie. My uncle has not died, has he? I am sure Sir Horace would never have told me so. Oh, no, but Papa, I should not be talking about him, and of course I don't know precisely, but I think poor Papa found himself in difficulties. In fact, I know it was so, for I found my mother in great distress once, and she told me a little, because she was so distracted she hardly knew what she was doing. In general, she would never say a word about Papa to any of us, except Charles, I suppose, and I dare say Maria, now that she is a married lady. Only then my great-uncle Matthew died, and he left all his fortune to Charles, and I don't understand exactly how it was, but I believe Charles did something with mortgages. Whatever it was, it seems to have placed poor Papa quite in his power, and I am very certain that it is Charles who pays for Hubert and Theodore, besides settling all the debts. That Mama did tell me. Dear me, how very uncomfortable it must be for your Papa, remarked Sophie. My cousin Charles sounds like a most disagreeable creature. He is quite odious, said Cecilia. I sometimes think he takes a delight in making everyone miserable, for I am sure he grudges us the least pleasure, and is only anxious to marry us to respectable men with large fortunes. I get to that part, and I just fall off the chair at that one. Yay, respectable men of large fortunes, who are quite middle-aged and sober, and could do nothing but catch the mumps. Since Sophie was far too intelligent to suppose this embittered speech was a mere generalization, she at once pressed Cecilia to tell her more about the respectable man with mumps. And after a little hesitation and a good deal of circumlocution, Cecilia not only divulged that a marriage between herself and Lord Charlbury had been arranged, though not as yet announced, but favored her with a word picture of the Honorable Augustus Faunhope, which must have seemed like the ravings of delirium to anyone who had not been privileged to behold that beautiful young man. But Sophie had already met Mr. Faunhope, and instead of coaxing her cousin to lie down upon the bed with a cooling draught, she said in the most matter-of-fact way, Yes, very true. I have never seen Lord Byron, but they tell me he is nothing to Mr. Faunhope. He is quite the most handsome man I think I ever saw. You know Augustus? Cecilia breathed, clasping her hands at her palpitating bosom. Yes, that is to say, I'm acquainted with him. I fancy I danced with him once or twice at the balls in Brussels last year. Was he not attached to Sir Charles Stuart in some capacity or another? Only one of his secretaries, but Augustus is a poet, and of course he has no head for business or affairs, which is a circumstance that disgusts Charles more than all the rest, I believe. Oh, Sophie, when we met, it was at Almack's Assembly Rooms, and I was wearing a gown of palest blue satin, embroidered all over with silken rosebuds and knots of silver twist. We no sooner saw each other than he assured me that it was the same with him. How could I suppose that there would be the least objection? The Faunhopes, you know. I dare say they have been here since the Conquest or some such thing. If I do not care a button for such things as fortunes or titles, what concern is it of Charles's? None at all, said Sophie briskly. Dear Cecilia, don't cry, I beg of you. Only tell me this, does your mamma dislike the notion of your marrying Mr. Faunhope? Dearest Mamma has such sensibility that I know she must feel for me, declared Cecilia, obediently drying her eyes. She is as good as told me so, but she dare not withstand Charles. That, Sophie, is what governs all in this house. Yeah. So, That was 4 pages as opposed to 2. I don't even know what to say, where to begin. That's a lot of fluff and I mean, people read that. I'm trying to keep out the bad words. Like, people read that, you fill in the blank. Yeah, well, by the way, that was page 75 that I started on. Not page 1, 75. We've all been introduced to most of those characters. The thing about, well, my uncle's still alive, isn't he? Yeah. She's come to her uncle's house to stay with them. Her uncle sent the invitation, and she came to their house. And on page 75, she's asking, well, my uncle's still alive, right? Yeah.
The 60s were a magical time, and we should all be grateful. It cleansed our palates of this dread.
That was published in 1950.
Was it 50?
It's 1950, but yeah. So, okay, let's see. So what's the who? We've got, I mean, we're not even introducing these characters. So I guess what we were introducing or supposed to be introducing is the romance. We'll go with that, right? Because she's introducing us to the romantic entanglement. So like the Mr. Fawnhope. So yeah, we put, the names also slay me. But it's like, okay, oh, Papa, I'm in love with this man, but I'm engaged to this other, almost engaged to this other one. The what? Well, there's a lot of babbling. I guess what we've kind of established is that what she said was, you know, she's normally shy, but she'll just talk her head off to this cousin because her cousin's so easy to, such a good listener. Okay, we'll come up with, yeah, well, just like, sort of exposition, cousin's character. We'll go with that. Sure. When? Where? How and why? I know, why did I torture you with that whole reading? Yeah. So, what are the takeaways from this? You know, dialogue needs to be relevant. Okay, I mean, how much of that, oh, I mean, stilted dialogue? This whole, I mean, the whole thing, let's cram in this statement about man of, you know, a wealthy man of good, you know, a respectable gentleman of good fortune, because obviously Georgette Heyer liked Jane Austen. So let's, like, we're gonna fit in the Jane Austen thing on page 75. Because, wow, I did actually read up to, when I started reading, this was about as far as I got before I just couldn't do it anymore and gave up. And I couldn't. But, all right, so keeping your dialogue real, Georgette Heyer is inventing the Regency romance because, you know, she wants to write like Jane Austen, but Jane Austen was writing a contemporary work of her times, and now we're writing historical stuff. So she's going to cram in all the detail. There is such a thing as too much detail when it doesn't matter anymore. You know, it's like, did you care about these characters while they're talking? You want your dialogue to say something about the characters. Could we say that Cecilia, you know, the narrator says Cecilia's shy, but she's a motor mouth? So is Lady Omsbudley on page 101. So it's not even character development. So yeah, can't get there with that one. The dialogue now it's easier to appreciate the Jane Austen dialogue against this one. It was brisk. It was back and forth. She said a thing, he said a thing. Even the longest sentences about Netherfield Park is, let it last, this is great. Why is it great? You know, he interrupts her, even if all he says is something snarky. Number one, it's character development. Mr. Bennet is a snarky, I love him, but he can be kind of a jerk. But I do love him. But just having the back and forth, and it's not even just to cut up the the dialogue, it's adding character in there. So you want that the back and forth, even when it's just to make it not monotonous like Cecilia, it still has use. So this really, my computer just is really bored with me here apparently. Oh yeah, remember that thing we said about show, don't tell? That was a lot of telling and not much showing. And showing, or and telling, and telling, and telling, and telling, and telling. You know, I realized at some point in time that if it wasn't for the fact that I went and looked up, check your facts, it almost sounded like the writer didn't like Jane Austen and was like making fun of her. And then I looked it up and was like, no, she was seriously thinking that she's like paying homage to her with this thing that almost sounds like a parody or something. So let's see. So from these examples, what have we got? What makes for good dialogue? There's a point to it. Imparting useful information. Useful information. Do we care what color Cecilia's dress is? It's pale blue, right? How about furthering the plot? Have we gotten any farther on the plot? I guess we did. To be fair, we got further on the plot. Now we know that her love conflict thing. We had to wait to page 75 to find out what the plot of the story is, but go us. Establishing character. So each character should have a recognizable speaking voice. Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet, we can tell them apart. Sophie and Cecilia, like we know that Sophie is with the listener and not the speaker, but there isn't much in their actual inside the quotations that tells them apart. You can tell them apart by the stuff outside of the quotations. Make sure you put the difference between characters inside of the quotations. Just to, I will do a bit of this, Lady Umbersley on page 101, because I won't torture you with quite so much of this, but going there, it does it's just a demonstration that it's not that we're establishing Cecilia's character. I am quite determined to give a party for you, replied Lady Umbersley firmly. I promised your father that I would do so. Besides, I'm very fond of entertaining. I assure you, we are not in general so quiet as you find us at present. When I brought dear Maria out, we gave a ball, 2 rout parties, a Venetian breakfast, and a masquerade. But then, she added with a sigh, poor cousin Matilda was still alive, and she sent out all the invitation cards and arranged everything with Gunther's. I miss her sadly. She was carried off by an inflammation of the lung, you know. Does that sound any different from Cecilia? There's no differentiation within the characters. So there's my thing on dialogue. So let's talk about description. And since we've already gone over the Grand Sophie, let's just talk about sort of the description part of it and just circle back. So the first thing we get was Cecilia we said, is shy and not very confiding. And what's the very first thing we get? Motor mouth. Does she sound shy and not confiding? No. There's, here's this cousin that I've just met, and I'm telling my whole heart and soul to her. Not a very convincing description. At least we got the respectful men of large fortunes. But, we got that run. Oh, by the way, did you notice the run on? You wouldn't notice the run on sentences because I was just reading with breaths in there. But one of those sentences was in the page is a page and a half. It's just commas, dependent clause, dependent clause, dependent clause, comma, dependent clause. I know that's how we speak, but this is written language. We get to put periods in once in a while. But then you get the dialogue. Palpitating bosom. You get to that part, and that's what it's like. Is this serious? Is this supposed to be a parody or something? Oh no, she's really trying to be serious here. palpitating bosom, and all Mac's assembly room, and I was wearing a gown of palest blue satin embroidered all over with silken rosebuds and knots of silver twist. I mean, it's almost like I have to go into Valley Girl talk to like do it, because it's like, oh my God, my dress was like so perfect, and like then he looked at me and like he thought just the same thing. He was like into me, like I was into him at the time. I mean, okay, we could get that out of the characters and all that, but was that useful as description? Not really. Do we care that her dress was blue? Not really. Oh yes. Do I have any costume Nazis in the room? Costumers? History geeks? All right. One of the things that it's a big thing when I've got a master's degree in cinema television, and when you're on a film set, there's this horrid thing that they do on film sets that I've heard. I really have heard this. Is they're like, okay, well, we're doing this thing. Well, so we lose the history people in the audience. It's fine. And it's like, if you take that and extrapolate it, it's like, we just blew up the car with a blowtorch. And it's like, and somebody's like, psst, you know that blowtorch is like the kind of thing you have in shop classes in every high school, and you can't blow the thing up with that blowtorch? What are you going to say? So we lost everybody who ever took shop class in high school in the audience. It's like, it's kind of if you ignore your audience and assume they're dumb or not paying attention, is that really how you want to treat your readers? I mean, to me, the relationship to your readers is a sacred bond. I go nuts on my historical research, and I've actually had people say, it's historical fiction, right? And it's like, if I can't tell them what it tasted like, what it smelled like, what it felt like, what it sounded like, I'm not done researching. And besides, I got to spend all the time in like the Hyde's History Archives, working on the book set in Pittsburgh, and it was fun. And archivists are amazing. You could walk up and say, okay, like, I need to know if the year is 1878 and I'm rich and I live in this part of town and I'm sick, who's my doctor? And you go, Dr. McClellan, I'll go get you his file. Boom. Always make friends with the librarian. Whenever you've got a project, go make friends with the librarian, because they know cool things and they know how to find it like that. So, take the shortcut. They're full of really cool things you just wanted to know. God, that sounds like I'm kissing to Solemn or something like that. Hi, I love you. But yeah. So the thing about the dress that. So as the costume Nazi, I'll tell you that muslin was the fashionable fabric in gowns in the Regency and all that. And when she's talking about, I had this satin gown on. How many of you have seen some version of Emma? So at the very end of Emma, the bad guy, the crass woman who can't ever get it right, the socially awkward person, turns around and says, "There's a shocking lack of satin." Yeah. The crass person says there should be satin. She's supposed to be the country bumpkin, the bad guy, the one you don't look up to. So if this woman who's supposed to be rich and sophisticated and the satin dress kind of says, you're the rube. So that just says to me that the writer is ignorant and needs to go do more homework before she writes bad books. So she just wrote this thing and lost the history nerds and the Jane Austen fans in the audience. You don't want to lose those people. Writing your audience, your readers, it is a sacred trust. Do your homework. And if you're going to talk about clothing, look at a fashion plate. We all got Pinterest. It's easy to get Pinterest and go look at, type in, it's 1803. What do the dresses look like? They're not made out of satin. Okay. All right. So yeah, that was an ouchy thing for the reader to do. All right. Now I got a gossip here. So I have done. I have been a judge for writing book contests, and I am not going to divulge the name of the author or the name of the book, but everybody knows about repetition and don't do that, and description ought to be Descriptive. Descriptions ought to make sense. I'm sure you're, like, you want things to be romantic. We'll talk, I'll read some really great descriptions later. But since we're on the bad ones, let's just stick with the bad ones first. This one writer had a thing for like candles. It's like showing up in weird ways. So I just have to read you these. You could just like put in your Kindle, you could search on a word. So, first one's just boring, the chamber has a candle in it. Page 51, the king gazed at the candle and recounted, Tristan, a boy of 14 under my ward, bloody, bloody, blah. Page 52, waved his hand through the candle flame as if the burning pain eased the discomfort of what he was about to reveal. Also page 52, gaze shifted to the burning candle as if looking for some kind of succor as he continued his grim tale. Page 53, he got out of the chair and gazed at the candlelight before shifting her eyes to the back corner where her father picked up a box. Also page 53, and held his hand over the candle flame and pulled it away. He inspected his reddened palm as he continued. Page 57, her wavering reflection in the candle flame. What? There was a lot of reflections in the candle flames what? Page 62. A burning candle cast their shadows up the stone wall. Page 69. Held his hand over the burning candle. And this is a different character. Blah, 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 blah. Also page 69. She moved the melting candle aside to study his face as she spoke. Page 70. Amron snuffed out the candle. Only the torchlight filtering through the thin curtain dimly lit the room. Okay. Oh, now we get to jump to page 85. Not even a candle to light up this forsaken place. Page 86. Help me find a candle, a lamp, a torch, anything to light my room. Also page 86. Help me find a candle, light my room. Also page 86. I need a candle, a lamp or a torch would work. Page 87. Is there a candle around? Trying to contain a nervous giggle, bloody, bloody, blah. It goes on. I want to say 5 different characters stick their hands in the candle. 6 characters are reflected in the candle flame, and that was really the what? If this is supposed to be a magical realm. It was like written as historical fiction, but it wasn't. It was fantasy. And I'm not a big fantasy writer, but can any fantasy writers tell me, do you like see your reflection in candle flames because you're writing fantasy? Okay. Doesn't happen in Anne McCaffrey, I'll tell you that. So that was, I'm going to back up and now talk about bad dialogue again, because as you can imagine with those descriptions, I learned a lot about how not to write dialogue from this same book. You know, sometimes you learn more from the bad examples than from the good examples. Every single character, besides 5 of them had the flame thing and all that kind of stuff, the characters all spoke exactly alike. The young woman, her lover, her mother, the king, the captain of the guard, the evil witch, the wizardy guy who you couldn't tell if he was good or evil, all of them, when they were speaking, and you know how it's like bloody, bloody, blah, end quotes, verb, and rest of sentence, they raged, stormed, demanded, blazed, stomped, shouted, proclaimed, grimaced, yanked, sighed loudly, and hardened his stare. I thought that was like, okay, sure. But that was after he felt as if his heart had been ripped out. Then he rubbed his jaw as if he was mulling over everything she had said. Why not say he rubbed his jaw while he mulled over what she said? No, as if. It was like, Huh? So every description was over the top, heavily dramatic, god awful. And when I scrolled to the end, just because like I like, okay, I had to let them, I don't feel I can judge this because I'm hating this too much. And maybe somebody who likes more fantasy can do it more justice than I can. Now, I think the writing is just as bad, but I just didn't feel like I got nothing except, oh, honey, don't publish until you've had somebody look at this. At the end, the writer was not 13. If the writer would have been a 13-year-old, where, you know, I mean, because like all that stomping and shouting and all that kind of stuff sounds like a 13-year-old kid. If a 13-year-old would have been written the whole thing, it would have been, yay, go you. That was good first effort, yay. It was a retired 60-some-year-old woman who's like, this is her dream to retire to her cottage in Scotland or Ireland or Poland or Mexico, wherever it was, and was writing, and it was in the dedication, it's like, and yay to my friends who are like, you know, so encouraging, and it's like, have your friends be honest. Every time okay, so you got the book, you give it to a bunch of people to read, you give it to your editors, you give it to your publishers, you know, while you're doing read this over, first thing you do, you know how we don't do red pens anymore? First thing I do when I have finally even let anybody look at it, and I'll do the first 4 drafts before it's not ripe yet. Why give anybody else this stuff when it's not ready to be seen? When it's ready to even be seen, I hand them a red pen with the paper and say, don't let me embarrass myself. It's my name on the cover. Be brutal. And they know better. It's like, yeah, the more red you see, that every bit of red on the page, that is not something to be humiliated by. That is the process, and you are trusting that process, and you want that process, because it's your name on the cover, not your friends going, oh, honey, you're such a good writer. None of her friends were willing to tell her that this was not ready to be put in print. And it's like, and there are, like, I spent the money to do self-publishing school so I could learn more about marketing. And I had people, you like get in sort of like groups of writers and you do this writers group thing. And there was like, yeah, here, proofread this. Like, oh, honey, this isn't ripe yet. Like when she's talking about, here's the scene and blah, blah, blah. And then the bell rang, and the man she's talking to looked over her shoulder at the customer coming in the door, and she goes, blah, 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 and then, I'll help you, says a disembodied voice. The disembodied voice that clearly belongs to the customer, that's why the bell rang, and you turn around, ooh, there's the handsome man. And I just went from chewing out this clerk to having wicked thoughts about the guy. Really? Like, 180 degrees. It's like I had whiplash from this character's emotional swings in the first couple chapters. And it's like, it just wasn't real. Your editor is your friend. Have them look at things and say, this doesn't play genuine to me. You want it to feel genuine. You're allowed to, it's like, it can play genuine. Get the advice and be willing to. I mean, you have to have a bit of a thick skin because you put your soul on the page. But when you get the feedback back, remember that's why you go to your friends the first few drafts, because they'll do it with love. Because they won't love you any less when they go, oh honey, oh honey, oh honey. Let's see. I want the poo. Let's talk about the good descriptions now. And let's get way out of Jane Austen. Let's do something really different. And so trying to get something, how different can I get from Jane Austen? I went with Douglas Adams. So is anybody Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan? I knew I could count on you. All right. So when you're doing description, part of it's supposed to be painting a picture. And this is the picture, you're bringing your readers with you so that they can see what you're seeing. They can see inside your head at what you're seeing. So I'm going to start some very short ones here because the inside of Douglas Adams's head is just a little bit interesting. He was staring at the instruments with the air of one who is trying to convert Fahrenheit to centigrade in his head while his house is burning down. Or, the ships hung in the sky in much the same way that bricks don't. He has personality problems beyond the dreams of analysts. I think I've known that guy. Okay, and this is one that I found it and went, whoa. I think of Douglas Adams as being kind of like acerbic, like ships hanging in the sky like bricks don't. But he had this one. There is a moment in every dawn when light floats. There is the possibility of magic. Creation holds its breath. I was like, whoa, that wasn't just seeing with your eyes, it's seeing with your heart. And it was like, that was a description that was like, I didn't see that one coming. I did not remember that one. Okay, one more. I have some very long ones from him, but I'll do one more like shorter, longer but shorter than the big ones. The storm had now definitely abated, and what thunder there was now grumbled over more distant hills, like a man saying, "And another thing," 20 minutes after admitting he'd lost the argument. So you see, there's a lot of humor in his descriptions, and notice how very disparate it is. We're talking about a storm, and how do we get from a storm to a man grumbling about losing an argument? But wow, that the improbability of it is part of what makes it work, and it's definitely relatable. So always keeping everything relatable. Olivia and I just she was in the same thing with me. She had to do the minuet for me, but we had to talk about making things relatable for the people you're presenting for. So, all right, let's move on. So Willa Cather is a writer who lived in Nebraska. I'm a big fan of Laura Ingalls Wilder, but I wanted to talk about somebody besides Laura Ingalls Wilder, so I branched out to Willa Cather and completely different descriptions of what it's like to be in a covered wagon going across the West. And Willa Cather knows how to, she gets inside what you're looking at more than, as like that thing about seeing with your eyes and seeing with your heart. Laura doesn't do as good a job. So shut up and just read, Jeanette. I tried to go to sleep, but the jolting made me bite my tongue, and I soon began to ache all over. When the straw settled down, I had a hard bed. Cautiously, I slipped from under the buffalo hide, got up on my knees, and peered over the side of the wagon. There seemed to be nothing to see. No fences, no creeks or trees, no hills or fields. If there was a road, I could not make it out in the faint starlight. There was nothing but land, not a country at all, but the material out of which countries are made. There was nothing but land, slightly undulating, I knew, because often our wheels ground against the brake as we went down into a hollow and lurched up again on the other side. I had the feeling that the world was left behind, that we had got over the edge of it and were outside man's jurisdiction. I had never before looked up at the sky when there was not a familiar mountain ridge against it, but this was the complete dome of heaven, all there was of it. I did not believe that my dead mother and father were watching me from up there. They would still be looking for me at the sheepfold down by the creek, or along the white road that led to the mountain pastures. I had left even their spirits behind me. The wagon jolted on, carrying me I knew not whither. I don't think I was homesick. If we never arrived anywhere, it did not matter. Between that earth and that sky, I felt erased, blotted out. I did not say my prayers that night. Here I felt, what would be, would be. So that was a whole lot of showing us what was outside her head and able to explain to us what was inside her head. there's that real budget. It's like there's no spare words. Everything is there for a reason. There's no embroidered blue satin in this one. Everything is there for a reason. The hard straw is sort of the external things that are already showing us what the inside of her, what's going on inside of her. And then she elaborates more. So it sort of builds. She sort of builds to that, I didn't even say my prayers. I'm just existing. So, but now we're going to a completely different take, Mark Twain. So one of the things that I just happened to, this is really funny, this is my college textbook from when I was an undergraduate and an English major, and past Jeanette left me notes in the margin for future Jeanette to find. So I had to thank myself for leaving myself notes to find for myself later on, because this was exactly what I needed for what we're doing here in talking about description. So I just got to read the little notes in the margin. Poetic language, picturesque prose, similes and metaphors and colors. Where have we just been listening to some very picturesque language? Okay. But this is Mark Twain we're talking about. But this is actually Mark Twain at some of his deepest. So, now when I had mastered the language of this water, this is from Old Times on the Mississippi, so he's talking about that river that we know he knew well. I have friends in Hannibal, so. Now when I had mastered the language of this water and had come to know every trifling feature that bordered the great river as familiarly as I knew the letters of the alphabet, I had made a valuable acquisition. But I had lost something too. I had lost something which could never be restored to me while I lived. All the grace, the beauty, the poetry had gone out of the majestic river. I still keep in mind a certain wonderful sunset which I witnessed when steamboating was new to me. A broad expanse of the river was turned to blood. In the middle distance, the red hue brightened into gold, through which a solitary log came floating, black and conspicuous. In one place, a long slanting mark lay sparkling upon the water. In another, the surface was broken by boiling, tumbling rings that were as many tinted as an opal. Where the ruddy flush was faintest was a smooth spot that was covered with graceful circles and radiating lines, ever so delicately traced. The shore on our left was densely wooded, and the somber shadow that fell from this forest was broken in one place by a long ruffled trail that shone like silver. And high above the forest wall, a clean-stemmed dead tree waved a single leafy bough that glowed like a flame in the unobstructed splendor that was flowing from the sun. There were graceful curves, reflected images, woody heights, soft distances, and over the whole scene, far and near, the dissolving lights drifted steadily, enriching it every passing moment with new marvels of coloring. I stood like one bewitched. I drank it in a speechless rapture. The world was new to me. I had never seen anything like this at home. But as I've said, a day came when I soon began to cease noting the glories and the charms which the moon and the sun and the twilight wrought upon the river's face. Another day came when I ceased altogether to note them. Then, if that sunset scene had been repeated, I should have looked upon it without rapture, and should have commented upon it inwardly after this fashion. This sun means that we are going to have wind tomorrow. That floating log means the river is rising, small thanks to it. That slanting mark on the water refers to a bluff reef which is going to kill somebody's steamboat one of these nights. If it keeps on stretching out like that, those tumbling boils show a dissolving bar and a changing channel there. The lines and circles in the slick water over yonder are a warning that troublesome place is shoaling up dangerously. That silver streak in the shadow of the forest is the break from a new snag, and he has located himself in the very best place he could have found to fish for steamboats. That tall, dead tree with a single living branch is not going to last long, And then, how is a body ever going to get through this blind pace at night without that friendly old landmark? No, the romance and beauty were all gone from the river. All the value any feature of it had for me now was the amount of usefulness it could furnish toward compassing the safe piloting of a steamboat. Since those days, I have pitied doctors from my heart. What does the lovely flush in a beauty's cheek mean to a doctor but a break that ripples from some deadly disease? Are not all her visible charms sewn thick with what are to him the signs and symbols of hidden decay? Does he ever see her beauty at all? Or doesn't he simply view her professionally and comment upon her unwholesome condition all to himself? And doesn't he sometimes wonder whether he has gained most or lost most by learning his trade? So that was, again, that was like the most romantic thing I've heard, I think I've ever, I remember reading of Mark Twain's. But here he gives us the romance and he gives us these descriptions and then he explodes them and say, well, that's what it used to mean and it doesn't mean that to me now. Because this is Mark Twain we're talking about, so. But his juxtaposition almost, it's the exact same scene, it's the exact same river. He interprets that twig, that mountain, but he gives us both versions of it. He gives us the glories when he first saw it and he was in raptures, and he gives us the, what do you see now? And that, and there too, what did he just do? He also told us about the who. He told us about the character in all of that. So these layers of description are, I mean, they take work, they take thought, and it's certainly useful to, you know, learn from the good examples as well as the bad examples. And quite personally, like my own examples, one of the things that's in this too, you'll notice the lack of, what were the words? Circumlocution, the lack of palpitating bosoms. All of the language is very clean. It's simple. There's no reason to get fancy about it when you're just telling a story or giving the descriptions, give the descriptions. And one of the things that I think has been a theme in a lot of these good descriptions, they're writing about what they love. They always say, write about what you know, write about what you know. We've heard it. Right. How do you do that? Whatever. I want to write about aliens in outer space. Well, if you love aliens in outer space, you're the best person to write about them. But if you think about it, Mark Twain knew that river. He loved that river. He loved that river enough to share it in both of the incarnations that he had. Willa Cather from Nebraska, describing going across Nebraska in a wagon. She loves in Nebraska. I mean, it's like reading her biography. It's kind of like, go Cornhuskers! It's just, she is a booster for Nebraska. She's writing about what she loves, and that's how she knows the loving things she puts in there about it. So when you're working on your own writing, does everybody have a manuscript in progress? Go ahead, admit it. Yeah, yeah, that means you have, that means you're a writer, you know. As you're writing, keep that in the front. So many people want to write about other things. Start with what you love and let it, and see where it takes you. I love bustle dresses, and that is why my first two books are set between 1875 and 1889. I got to write about bustle dresses and natural disasters and making friends with librarians and so forth. So start with what you love and go from there. And that's how it's like, well, how the hell am I supposed to write something as layered as that? Just tell your friend something about something you love a lot, and just the words come tumbling out of your mouth. And it's all in there. It's just picking your subjects with love. So, all right, we've got it's been exactly an hour. Does anybody have any questions, comments, observations, et cetera, et cetera? Okay. Well then, I'll just stop talking now, and Solomon will stop recording now. If anybody is interested in any of my books, I've got copies of all 5 of them on the back table, and I take Venmo. Otherwise, I will just chat and linger and chat if anybody wants to talk, and not in front of the whole class. thank you so much for talking with me about literature tonight. The modern, wait, I should do the proper curtsy. Every decade has it differently, so.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. A big thank you to Jeanette for leading such a fun and engaging workshop. That was fantastic. Thank you. Just a reminder, we'll be back in this room Wednesday, October 4th. We're still continuing with story elements, so the next focus will be plot and prose, and that will be with local author Molly McRae. And also just a reminder, our story contest is live, opened on September 6th. So all of the fall workshops are geared towards helping you prepare a short story for the contest. You can find all the details about prizes, story guidelines, and deadlines at champaign.org/writers. So hope to see you at the next workshop.
And
Thank
if
you.
you're kind of going, oh, I don't want to submit my story for the contest, just do it. Just do it.
And you never know, there's great prizes. One of the prizes for first place is a consultation with a professional author and professional writer. So definitely consider entering the contest. And thank you for coming.
Can everybody also say, give a thanks to Solemn? She puts together these amazing writers' workshops.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.